بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة، فقلت وعليك السلام. قال إني يجد في بدني ضعفا، فقلت له أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به، فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به، وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله، فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبلا وقال السلام عليك يا أماه، فقلت وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء، فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه، فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وصي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء، ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء، فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم، أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم، ومحبون لمن أحبهم، إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم، قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله، إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي: إذن والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي: إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن مثل عيسى عند الله كمثل آدم خلقه من تراب ثم قال له كن فيكون. الحق من ربك فلا تكن من الممترين. فمن حاجك فيه من بعد ما جاءك من العلم فقل تعالوا ندع أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين. إن هذا لهو القصص الحق وما من إله إلا الله وإن الله لهو العزيز الحكيم. فإن تولوا فإن الله عليم بالمفسدين. قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. فإن تولوا فقولوا اشهدوا بأننا مسلمون. يا أهل الكتاب لم تحاجون في إبراهيم وما أنزلت التوراة والإنجيل إلا من بعده أفلا تعقلون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jaffer, Fawzi Bulan Salawat.
گھر سے مباہل کے لیے پنج تن چلے، گھر سے مباہل کے لیے پنج تن چلے، کچھ پھول تھے جو بن کے وقار چمن چلے، اور اس قافلے کی جیت پر کیوں نہ یقین ہو، اس قافلے کی جیت پر کیوں نہ یقین ہو، جس قافلے کی پشت پہ خیبر شکن چلے، گھر سے مباہل کے لیے پنج تن چلے، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، میں مرید خیر الانام ہوں، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، مجھے عشق ہے تو خدا سے ہے، مجھے عشق ہے تو رسول سے، یہ کرم ہے سارا بطول کا، میرے منہ سے آئے مہک صدا جو میں نام لوں تیرا جھوم کے، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، مجھے عشق سر و زمن سے ہے، مجھے عشق سارے چمن سے ہے، مجھے عشق ان کے وطن سے ہے، مجھے عشق ان کی گلی سے ہے، مجھے عشق ہے تو علی سے ہے، مجھے عشق ہے تو حسن سے ہے، مجھے عشق ہے تو حسین سے، مجھے عشق شاہ زمن سے ہے، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، میں تو پنج تن کا غلام ہوں، ہوا کیسے تن سے وہ سر جدا، جہاں عشق ہے وہیں کربلا، میری بات انہی کی بات ہے، میرے سامنے وہی ذات ہے، وہی جن کو شیر خدا کہیں، جنہیں باب صلی اللہ کہیں جنہیں آنکھوں والے، نبی کہیں وہی جن کو ذاتے، علی کہیں وہی پختہ ہے، میں تو خام ہوں، میں تو پنجتن کا غلام ہوں، میں تو پنجتن کا غلام ہوں۔ میں قمر ہوں شاعر بے نوا، میری حیثیت ہی بھلا ہے کیا، وہ ہے بادشاہوں کے بادشاہ، میں ہوں ان کے در کا بس ایک گدا، میرا پنجتن سے ہے واسطہ، میرا نسبتوں کا ہے سلسلہ، میں فقیر خیر انام ہوں، میں تو پنجتن کا غلام ہوں، میں تو پنجتن کا غلام ہوں۔ میں غلام ابن غلام ہوں، میں تو پنجتن کا غلام ہوں۔ صلوات۔
آغاز کرتا ہوں کہ مناتے کیوں نہیں جشن مباہلہ بولو، مناتے کیوں نہیں جشن مباہلہ بولو، ہے اس میں کون سی منطق یہ ہم بتائیں گے، مناتے کیوں نہیں جشن مباہلہ بولو، ہے اس میں کون سی منطق یہ ہم بتائیں گے، مباہلہ تو ہے سچائیوں کی جیت کا دن، ہے اس میں کون سی منطق یہ ہم بتائیں گے، مباہلہ تو ہے سچائیوں کی جیت کا دن، جو سچے ہوں گے وہی تو اسے منائیں گے، مباہلہ تو ہے سچائیوں کی جیت کا دن، جو سچے ہوں گے وہی تو اسے منائیں گے، یہ بحث بیکار ہے کس چیز سے بہتر ہے علی، یہ بحث بیکار ہے کس چیز سے بہتر ہے علی، یوں سمجھ لیجئے کہ قرآن کے برابر ہے علی، یوں سمجھ لیجئے کہ قرآن کے برابر ہے علی، حج پہ جانا چھوڑ دو عمرے پہ جانا چھوڑ دو، حج پہ جانا چھوڑ دو عمرے پہ جانا چھوڑ دو، بچ کے جاؤ گے کہاں کعبے کے اندر ہے علی، بچ کے جاؤ گے کہاں کعبے کے اندر ہے علی، عید غدیر ابھی ابھی گزرا ہے، عید غدیر کے حوالے سے کچھ مسائل پیش کرنا چاہتا ہوں کہ بے ذکر علی کوئی بھی سورہ نہیں ملا، بے ذکر علی کوئی بھی سورہ نہیں ملا، صد شکر ہم کو دین ادھورا نہیں ملا، صد شکر ہم کو دین ادھورا نہیں ملا، جنت ملے گی کیسے تجھے دشمن علی، جنت ملے گی کیسے تجھے دشمن علی، تجھ کو خدا کا دین بھی پورا نہیں ملا، تجھ کو خدا کا دین بھی پورا نہیں ملا، مولا علی ولی کی ولایت کو بانٹ کر، مولا علی ولی کی ولایت کو بانٹ کر مجھ پر میرے رسول نے احسان کر دیا، مولا علی ولی کی ولایت کو بانٹ کر مجھ پر میرے رسول نے احسان کر دیا، ارے مشکل بہت تھا فرق حلال و حرام کا، مشکل بہت تھا، مشکل بہت تھا فرق حرام و حلال کا، یہ کام بھی غدیر نے آسان کر دیا، مشکل بہت تھا فرق بھی حرام و حلال کا، یہ کام بھی غدیر نے آسان کر دیا، تو کلام پاک کی آیت تو پیش کر کوئی، کلام پاک کی آیت تو پیش کر کوئی، کسی یقین کسی امکان کی دلیل تو دے، کسی یقین کسی امکان کی دلیل تو دے، میں مان لوں گا کسی اور کو نبی کا وصی، میں مان لوں گا کسی اور کو نبی کا وصی، ارے غدیر جیسے ایک اعلان کی دلیل تو دے، غدیر جیسے ایک اعلان کی دلیل تو دے. تو علی کے باپ کو کافر بتا رہا ہے، مگر علی کے باپ کو کافر بتا رہا ہے، مگر تو اپنے باپ کے ایمان کی دلیل تو دے. علی کے باپ کو کافر بتا رہا ہے، مگر تو اپنے باپ کی ایمان کی دلیل تو دے. بہت عظیم، بہت عظیم، بہت بہترین کام ہوا، بہت عظیم، بہت بہترین کام ہوا. خدا کا دین علی مرتضیٰ کے نام ہوا. بہت عظیم، بہت بہترین کام ہوا. خدا کا دین علی مرتضیٰ کے نام ہوا. تو سروں پہ شمس، سروں پہ شمس سورج، سروں پہ شمس، گرم ریت، دل میں بغض علی. بہت عظیم، بہت بہترین کام ہوا. خدا کا دین علی مرتضیٰ کے نام ہوا. سروں پہ شمس، گرم ریت، دل میں بغض علی. کہاں کہاں سے جلانے کا انتظام ہوا. سر یا علی، بہت عظیم، بہت بہترین کام ہوا. خدا کا دین علی مرتضیٰ کے نام ہوا. سروں پہ شمس، گرم ریت، دل میں بغض علی. کہاں کہاں سے جلانے کا انتظام ہوا، کہاں کہاں سے جلانے کا انتظام ہوا. آخر میں ایک مکالمہ توجہ چاہوں گا کہ ایک روز میں نے خواب میں پوچھا کہ شیخ جی، ایک روز میں نے خواب میں پوچھا کہ شیخ جی، کیوں آپ خم ساقی کوثر کے پاس تھے. ایک روز میں نے خواب میں پوچھا کہ شیخ جی، کیوں آپ خم ساقی کوثر کے پاس تھے جب آپ کو علی کی ولایت سے تھا گریز. جب آپ کو علی کی ولایت سے تھا گریز، پھر آپ کیوں غدیر کے منبر کے پاس تھے. پھر آپ کیوں غدیر کے منبر کے پاس تھے. ارے صحرائے خم سے آپ چلے کیوں نہیں گئے. صحرائے خم سے آپ چلے کیوں نہیں گئے. کیا بات تھی جو صافہ محشر کے پاس تھے. کیا بات تھی جو صافہ محشر کے پاس تھے. سن کر میرا سوال یہ بولے جناب شیخ، سن کر میرا سوال یہ بولے جناب شیخ، مجبور تھے جو صافہ محشر کے پاس تھے. مجبور تھے. اب مجبوری کیا ہے. سن کر میرا سوال یہ بولے جناب شیخ، مجبور تھے جو صافہ محشر کے پاس تھے. ارے ہم لوگ خم سے بھاگ کے جاتے تو کس طرح ہم لوگوں کے کجاوے پیغمبر کے پاس تھے. ہم لوگ خم سے بھاگ کے جاتے تو کس طرح ہم لوگوں کے کجاوے پیغمبر کے پاس تھے.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. I know you guys are not used to English poetry, but inshallah I'd like to share some today with you, with your permission inshallah. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. And this poem is addressing those that ask me why I say Ya Ali. And it says, when told you're Shia, you worship Ali. When I'm told you're Shia, you worship Ali, I reply, Ya Ali, and I give them this answer. When I say Ya Ali, moves a mountain within me. Already I'm a lover, but I learn a lesson greater. When I say Ya Ali, it's a feeling like no other. The heaviest of hearts with these letters will shudder. When I say Ya Ali, I know nothing can go wrong. How can I go wrong? When I mention the universe's dictator, when I say Ya Ali, it's not polytheism or disbelief, because he was the one born in the house of the creator. When I say Ya Ali, don't look at me and frown. I'll return the frown I learned from Haydar. When I say Ya Ali, nothing is impossible. I could move from its place, the world's crater. When I say Ya Ali, there's no doubt in my mind. Bring forward every scholar and every debater. When I say Ya Ali, the whole world understands. When I say Ya Ali, the whole world understands. There's no need for explanation nor a translator. When I say Ya Ali on the day of his birth, the angels say it with me as they circle their master. When I say Ya Ali, from the heavens comes a roar and succumbs to coolness, even hellfire. When I say Ya Ali, I remember his sword, and I remember he left every duel a victor. When I say Ya Ali, in their graves his victims shake, victims from Uhud and Hunayn and Badr. When I say Ya Ali, never am I scared, for the one I rely on blew down the door of Khaybar. When I say Ya Ali, I see beside him a woman. When I say Ya Ali, I see beside him a woman. What is Ali without Fatima al-Zahra? When I say Ya Ali, I see a warrior and a husband of this balance, like his justice, only Ali the supplier. When I say Ya Ali, I'm reminded of his family with so little. How is it he was the best provider? When I say Ya Ali, I ask Ali through his servants for the sake of the dust under the shoes of Qambar. When I say Ya Ali, it's because that's what I was taught by his mother and his wife and even his brother. When I say Ya Ali, retreats the bravest of evil, for he was every messenger's protector. When I say Ya Ali, this is all I need in any plight I face and any disaster. When I say Ya Ali, in my mind something appears. It's as clear as his position, and it's just a number. When I say Ya Ali, I see in front of me a line. It's straight and upright. I'll show you with my finger. When I say Ya Ali, all I see is one man, one teacher, one imam, and one leader. When I say Ya Ali, I mean only Ali, and not maybe Ali or maybe some other. When I say Ya Ali, and I'm asked, what about the rest? When I say Ya Ali, and I'm asked, what about the rest? I respond with a question that makes them wonder. When Muhammad said Ya Ali, where were the so-called others in his time of need? In running away, there was no one stronger. When I say Ya Ali, it's a statement I'm making. Never will this name change. Never will this name change, for there's no one better. When I say Ya Ali, it's a challenge I'm announcing. Find me someone else who Ali's secrets could deliver. Find me someone else who Ali's secrets could deliver. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد، والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله. بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فمن حاجك فيه من بعد ما جاءك من العلم فقل تعالوا ندعو أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost for giving us the opportunity to celebrate what is known as Eid al-Mubahila. Eid al-Mubahila is indeed seen as a day of celebration, but very different to the other days of celebrations like the day of Fitr, or the Eid of Al-Adha, or the Eid of Al-Ghadir. And Eid al-Mubahila is a beautiful day. It's an event that takes place in the books of history in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih. And there are many dimensions to the discussions behind the event of Mubahila. And what's interesting is that in today's discussion I want to hint and speak about two of these different dimensions. The first dimension that we usually speak about, and that scholars usually highlight when it comes to the event of Mubahila, is the fada'il of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. In reference, specific references given to the Ahl al-Kisa. And the reason why that is because our madhab, the Imamiyya, followers of the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu was-salam, we rely heavily on the fada'il of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam to prove the authenticity of their leadership, to prove the authenticity of their wilayah in general. So whenever, for example, we end up having discussions with our brothers, the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, many a times we refer to the sources of history, to the sources of ahadith, to prove that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu was-salam was the best of his companions, was the most knowledgeable of his companions, was the most bravest of his companions. And all of these beautiful virtues are highlighted to show that he was indeed the true successor after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. If a person wants to wish and engage in discussions with the Ahlul Sunnah, usually what do? We refer to the ayat of the Holy Quran which highlights their fada'il. So at times, for example, we refer to ayat al-Tathir to show that Ahl al-Kisa were those who were purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or we refer to, for example, the ayah of Mawadda, or we refer to the ayah of Mubahila, or we refer to many of these different ayats which can be used one after the other to prove the fadail of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. And this has a compounding effect, that when we prove the legitimacy and the authenticity of our madhab, we don't just rely on one verse of the Holy Quran and then rely heavily on the ahadith to try and give us the tafsir of that verse. But rather we use many verses in the Quran, one which complements the other, which strengthens our argument to show that the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam were truly individuals who are untouched with regards to their fada'il, with regards to their excellences and the virtues that was given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is usually the first dimension that is often spoken of when we speak about the events surrounding Eid al-Mubahila. The second dimension, or the second area of the discussion, which I want to speak about more in this presentation, is the ta'amul, is the interactions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi with the Ahl al-Kitab in general. And it's a beautiful discussion with a lot of history. And we'll try and get through as much as possible in the next, in the following moments. And so what happens is that when we read the books of history, the feelings that has been adopted by many people even today, amongst historians, amongst the people, the laymen, you find that many of us tend to believe, or many people tend to believe, that when it comes to religion, and when it comes to the interactions of the scholars or of the people between these religions, it is a relationship that is not very much amicable. It is a relationship that has not been strong from the very beginning. It is a relationship of violence, a relationship of bloodshed. All one has to do is, for example, refer to the books of history, especially during the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam. And read how, for example, he interacted with the Jews of Medina. That there were battles that took place between the Muslims and the Jews. For example, what happened or what transpired in Khaybar. What happened in the aftermath of Khaybar, the lands of Fadak specifically, that was owned by the Jews and then seized by the Muslims. It has a rich history of bloodshed and schisms between the Muslims and the Jews. When you refer to even beyond that, when you refer to, for example, the history amongst the different kings and the Salatin, the Sultans in the Muslim Empire, centuries later, you find that there are, for example, wars or battles between the Christians and the Muslims. Today, in this day and age, you find, for example, there are battles between the Jews and the Muslims. And so, naturally, when people approach religion, they say or they feel, and they are very much convinced that it is a relationship of bloodshed, a relationship that cannot be reconciled. In fact, many people turn towards atheism for this reason. They say that religion is the cause of violence. When you look towards the religions and how they behaved in history, it is all full of bloodshed. And because of this, religion and the followers of certain religions are the causes of problems and many of the imbalance that has been caused, many of the oppression that exists in this world today. So it is better for people to turn away from religion and to embrace spirituality, for example, to embrace a common feature that is very much active within all human beings. Neglect religion and focus on that which brings people together, because religion brings people away or takes people away from each other. When you refer to the verses, when you refer to the history of the Holy Prophet of Islam, what's interesting is that the Holy Prophet's approach to the Ahl al-Kitab was very much proactive, was very much a movement or an interaction of peace. It was an interaction of solace. It was an interaction of dialogue and discussion. This is what the Prophet of Islam taught us. It was only in rare occasions where, for example, the Jews used and abused their positions to conspire against the Muslims. It was only then that the Prophet took a very active approach, an approach of aggression against them, because they had violated the peace treaty that existed amongst them. But other than that, you find, as we'll see in the course of our discussion, the Prophet had a very rich history of dialogue, of discussion, of approaching the Ahl al-Kitab with love and with respect and with humility. You find, for example, therefore, in our discussion tonight, I want to break up the discussion into three areas. The first area which I want to look at is, why is it that there are certain verses in the Holy Quran whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about the Ahl al-Kitab, He reprimands them with strong words. But then in other verses of the Holy Quran, Allah speaks highly of them with respect. So why does this contradiction take place or exist within the Holy Book? Number two, the second area of our discussion, when we look at the seerah of the Holy Prophet, we find that there are arguments that were used by the Ahl al-Bayt as well as the Rasulullah, highlighting the common features between Islam, Christianity and Judaism. Having understood that there are common features between these three religions, the Abrahamic religions, what is our responsibility based on this? And number three, the third area of our conversation tonight is, what was the relationship of the Prophet of Allah with the Ahlul Kitab and his interactions with them. So in order to begin our discussion, you find that when we turn to certain ayats in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in one area of the Quran very highly of the Ahlul Kitab. In other areas of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimands them. So for example, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قُلْ يَا أَهْلُ الْكِتَابِ لِمَا تَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ. Oh, from those of you who are from the book, the people of the book, why do you belie and why do you reject the ayats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? لِمَا تَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ. This is a form of rebuke, a reprimand towards the Ahl al-Kitab. وَاللَّهُ شَهِيدٌ عَلَى مَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Indeed, Allah is a witness, or Allah witnesses constantly what you do in your lives and every act that you make in your lives. So when you look at this verse is a reprimand towards the Ahlul Kitab. But then when you come across other verses in the Holy Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالسَّابِعِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And there are those who believe, and then there are those who are from amongst the Jews, and then there are those who are from amongst the Christians, and then there are those who are from amongst the Sabians, the Ahl al-Kitab in general. مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And then they are the ones who believe in Allah, and the ones who believe in the hereafter. وَعَمَلَ الصَّالِحَ. And then they do good. They actively interact with amalun salih, with righteous deeds. Allah then goes on to say, فَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. Indeed, there is an ajr for them. There is a reward for them. وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. There is no fear in their hearts on the day of judgment, and there is no grief, and there is no huzn, there is no sorrow for them on the day of judgment. So we have a second verse in the Holy Quran which highlights that the Ahl al-Kitab are spoken highly of. So now there is a clear contradiction in the Holy Book. Why does this contradiction take place? Number one, this is not a contradiction. The reason why is because when you look towards groups, and the idea of groups, social groups, within mankind, within our communities or within our societies, you find that often, many a times, the majority from amongst these groups are good. There are people who are respectable, people who have humility. But then there are some, the minority from these groups, who are the troublemakers. They often, many a times, cause trouble. And so what happens here is, when the ayat of the Holy Quran speaks about the Ahl al-Kitab in a negative way, reprimanding them, rebuking them, it is often in reference to those small minorities who cause trouble. There are those who cause fasad and fitna within the community. There were those who came forward and had an opinion. A very interesting opinion. They said that when the Muslims were growing in power, and in the very beginning of the advent of the religion of Islam, the Muslims were weak. They were in the minorities. It was here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the verses speaking highly of Ahl al-Kitab. When they got the support from Ahl al-Kitab, and then slowly the Muslim power began to grow, and they began to become more stronger. And then when they overpowered and conquered Mecca, for example, and then spreading the message of Islam far and wide into different empires, then the verses rebuking and reprimanding the Ahl al-Kitab were revealed. What this highlights is that the Quran, essentially in the beginning, when we needed them, we used them, but now we don't need them, we leave them aside. This is what the argument was. Our response was, no, it's not. That's not the case. This is not the principle of the Holy Quran. The Quran doesn't use this principle that we use them when we need them, and then we shun them when we don't need them, or we throw them aside when we don't need them. This goes against the very core principles, the essence of the Holy Quran and the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, what this goes on to say is that Allah reprimands those minority from amongst the Ahl al-Kitab who constantly used to cause trouble, fasad and fitna within their communities. When you look at Khaybar, you find that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi had a peace treaty or had a charter of rights that was examined and accepted by the Jews of Medina. It was only until they began to conspire with the mushriks of Mecca against the Muslims, it was until here that Rasulullah chose to actively fight against them. When they, for example, began to leak information regarding affairs of the Muslims, they signed a treaty explaining that they would support the Muslims, that they would be in alliance with the Muslims. But then when they saw that the Muslim empire were becoming stronger, and that their forces were becoming weaker, they needed to get rid of Rasulullah. So they conspired against him with the mushriks of Mecca. And so Rasulullah engages in battle and war with them, known as the Battle of Khaybar. And then of course, after which he seizes Fadak, and he cripples their entire economy and their power from the roots. And so you realize that the default position of the Holy Prophet of Islam was to approach them with peace, and only if they violated the peace was when the Prophet stood against them and fought with them. But if they surrendered, as history shows, if they surrendered, then leniency was shown towards them. You find, for example, even in this day and age, we find that there are certain groups amongst religions who represent that religion in a very negative way. When you turn towards, for example, in the Western countries, you have the white supremacists, and many of them are Christians. Does that mean that white supremacy represents Christianity? That the version of Christianity, the true version of Christianity, is what is represented by the white supremacists? No, of course not. Likewise today, when ISIS or Daesh represent the religion of Islam, we have tirelessly come forward and say and said or have said, and we continue to say, that they are far from the representations of the religion of Islam. What they do, how they behave, we are not apologetic to their behavior. The reason being is because they absolutely do not represent us, nor the religion of Islam. And so, likewise, in that day and age, there were those from amongst the minorities who represented their religion in a very negative way. It is then that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimands them with such verses. But the commoners, the majority, they had no issue with the movement of Islam. They were protected. They were part of a system. That system gave them rights. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, gives them the respect. La ikraha fid deen. Rasulullah did not force them towards the religion of Islam. In fact, there are two verses in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about peaceful coexistence between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. The only time, in this particular verse, the only time when Muslims are to fight and wage war against the non-Muslims is if the non-Muslims are actively trying to cause discord, to cause fasad and fitna. When they are fighting actively against the Muslims, expelling them from their houses, plundering their possessions, only then can the Muslims come forward and fight the non-Muslims. But as far as peaceful coexistence is considered or spoken of, you find that the same ayat speak about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages the showing of humility, the showing of akhlaq, the showing of peace amongst those who are considered to be non-Muslims, as long as they do not wage war against the Muslims themselves. So you find that the reason why there are contradicting verses within the Holy Quran, or it may seem contradictory, is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to those troublemakers within the Ahl al-Kitab. But as far as the majority are concerned, they are very much respected by the Muslims. With regards to the second area of our discussion, you find that in history, in the words of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, in the words of, for example, the ulama who have engaged in dialogues with the Christians, and even, for example, in certain ayats of the Holy Quran, you find that there are many common features between our religion, Islam, and the religion of Judaism and Christianity. In specific, with regards to Christianity, let's focus our discussion there because today is the day of Mubahila, which took place amongst the Christians. You find that there are many common features between Islam and Christianity. There is the belief in a God. It is a monotheistic religion. Yes, you have the whole concept of Trinity, but the root of Christianity is that it is a monotheistic religion that was established by Ibrahim alayhi salam. You find, for example, there is the belief of Isa alayhi salam, his existence. Yes, they believe that he is the Son of God, or that they believe that he is God himself. And we believe that he is the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there is immense and intense respect towards Isa alayhi salam. You find, for example, that there is a common feature, or there are other common features between Islam and Christianity. And these common features existed until the coming of Paul, or Saint Paul. When Saint Paul came, you find that many of these messages were slowly being concocted. But before the coming of Paul, you found, for example, common features included the forbidden, the consumption of the flesh of swine being haram. It was Paul who allowed it and made it permissible. You find, for example, circumcision was considered to be a practice amongst the Christians until Paul made it haram, or Paul discouraged it. You find, for example, there was the idea, and there were other ideas amongst following the Jewish religions, following the Sharia, that Christianity in its essence was a amal. It was a religion based on a'mal, on worship. It was Paul who came later and changed it. Jesus, the son of Mary, for example, Isa ibn Maryam, was one who used to follow the Jewish traditions, that he followed the Sharia of Musa alayhi salam, the prophet that came before him from the Ulul Azm. So you find that following the Jewish Sharia was something part and parcel amongst the Christians. It was later changed by St. Paul himself. So there were many common features between Islam and Christianity. Having understood that there are common features, what is our responsibility? You found that the ayat of the Holy Quran came forward and said that because there are common features between Islam and Christianity, use these common features to create a community. Use these features or common features to create an alliance between yourselves. And this is exactly what Rasulullah did. When he saw that there were Jews in Medina and there were Christians in Rome, there were Christians in Iran, there were Christians, for example, in Abyssinia, he reached out to them in the hope of creating an alliance, because there are many common features between Islam and Christianity. When you look towards certain tafasirs of the holy verses of the Holy Quran, referring to certain mufassirin and works of tafsir such as Al-Amthal or Tafsir Namuna, you find that Sheikh Nasir Makarim Shirazi Hafadahullah, may Allah increase his life, explains that when you realize that there are common features between Islam and Christianity, it becomes our responsibility as an ummah to build on this common ground, to try and to create an alliance between Muslim communities and Christian communities and Jewish communities as well. That we become a common banner of Tawheed, we become a banner of the respect that we show towards Isa alayhi salam or Musa alayhi salam. In Al-Mizan, for example, Allama Tabatabai Rahmatullah alayhi explains that no, we should go even beyond this. That we should gather and we should unite under the banner of Tawheed. And not just theoretical Tawheed, that we believe in La ilaha illallah. But beyond that, that we should be a manifestation of practical Tawheed. Tawheed is not just limited to my aql, that I believe that there is one God. I should try and manifest that within my actions as well. That I absorb taqwa, that I adhere to taqwa, that I become a physical manifestation of being God-fearing in my life. That is important, that I become a representative of my religion, that I become a representative of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, that I am conscious of my actions, whether they are good deeds or they are bad deeds. I should refrain from my sins or I should refrain from sins, and I should adhere towards the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I should call others to the worship of Allah. These are the common features that I should establish when dealing with the Christians and the Jews, to bring all of them towards the worship of Allah. Beyond this, he says, after you have established practical Tawheed, then you should go on to establish justice. Make sure that everyone have received their rights. To try and deter people from being oppressive, to try and stamp on and to extinguish the fires of oppression altogether. That can only happen when there is unity between the Ahlul Kitab. When you look at the life history of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, they say one day he was walking the streets of Kufa when he saw a Christian begging, an old man, blind. He inquires, he says, who is this person that he is begging? Can he not support himself? Why can he not support himself? Why is there no one looking after him? Why is no one sponsoring him so that he doesn't have to belittle himself from begging? And then they said to him, Yabna Rasul, they said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, this was a person, when he was young, he gave his strength and he gave whatever he could to defend the Muslim Ummah. He was a Christian who paid jizya. And now that strength has been taken away from him, his eyesight has been taken away from him, and he is in need. So we support him with whatever we can. Upon which the Imam replies, he says, it is unfair that when we needed him, we used him. Now that we do not need him, he has been shunned and he has been thrown aside. So you find that, of course, the Imam then goes on to support this person. But then we understand that even the Imam alayhi salam showed humility, showed kindness, even to the Christians. That even though they are not part of our religion, they also are part of a bigger picture that we should unite with them, and we should be a part of their lives just as how they should be a part of our lives in establishing a greater system of Tawheed, a greater system of unity. Beyond that, Allama Tabatabai says, then after you have established justice, you should go about establishing freedom and making the people liberals, making them liberated from their desires. Meaning what? Meaning to try and make people the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what a worthy position this is, to be the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to be the slave of any other person in this world, or not to be the slave of our desires. The greatest position is being an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when you look towards history, when you look specifically towards the history of the Holy Prophet of Islam, you find the Prophet of Islam encouraged heavily the idea of engaging with the Christian community, with the Jewish community, as much as possible. You find that books have recorded events in history saying that when there was a time in history between the Muslims and the Jews, it was a time of mistrust. It was a time of fasad and fitna. On the one hand, you had the munafiqeen amongst the Muslim ummah causing fasad and fitna within their communities. And that was coupled with the Jews giving information to the mushrikeen of Mecca. But even then, under such times of distress, times of mistrust, Rasulullah was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep on interacting with the Jews, to keep on interacting with the majority that were okay with the Muslim presence and the message of Islam. That the Prophet used to engage in their ceremonies, that the Prophet used to, for example, console those who are grieved after losing their loved ones. There's a beautiful piece of history, incident that takes place. They say one day a Jew passed away and his janazah was being carried in public. Rasulullah was sitting outside one of the shops with his companions. When this janazah passed by Rasulullah, he stood up with humility and he showed consolation towards the family that had lost their family member. Upon which one companion came forward and he said, Ya Rasulullah, this person is a Jew. Why stand up for him? Upon which the Prophet turned to him and he said to him, Alaysat nafsan? Is he not a soul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is he not a creation of Allah? Why can I not stand up? He is a creation of Allah and he deserves respect from every single human being. So you find that the Holy Prophet showed intense respect towards the Ahlul Kitab. Moving on to the final area of our discussion. When Rasulullah showed this immense respect towards the Ahlul Kitab, you find that he persuaded and he actively encouraged in da'wah, sending letters far and wide to try and bring them towards the religion of Islam. In the 7th year of Hijrah, in the 6th, 7th year of Hijrah, one of the greatest things that the Prophet did was that he sent letters to different empires, inviting them towards the religion of Islam. You find, for example, he sent letters towards the rulers of Yemen. He sent letters towards the rulers of Iran. He sent letters towards the rulers of Egypt. He sent letters towards the rulers of Ethiopia, Negus. Very famous history. The two migrations that take place in Mecca, they went towards Negus and sought protection from him. There's rich history between Abyssinia, Ethiopia, and the Prophet of Islam. He sent letters towards the rulers of Syria. He sent letters towards the rulers of Rome. Beautiful incident that takes place in Rome. They say that when Caesar, the ruler of Rome, received the invitation towards the religion of Islam, he read the letter. They say coincidentally Abu Sufyan was there in Rome for business purposes. When he read the letter of Rasulullah, he summons Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan goes to the courts of this ruler, Caesar, and a dialogue takes place between them. The Roman king, Caesar, says to Abu Sufyan, he says, do you know of Muhammad, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? Upon which he replies, Abu Sufyan replies, he says, yes, he is very famous in our lands. He says, what of his descendants? What of his lineage? What of his ancestors? Tell us something about his descendants. or his ancestors? Upon which Abu Sufyan replies, he says that he comes from a noble family. Okay, so then asks, he says, did any of his ancestors that came before him, were they rulers? Did they rule? Were they kings of your lands? He says, no, none of them were rulers. He says, this Muhammad, is he considered to be a liar? Has any falsehood, has any lie been uttered from his lips? Abu Sufyan admits, he says, no, in fact, he is known as As-Sadiq, and he is known as Al-Amin. He is known as the truthful in our lands, and he is known as the most trustworthy in our lands. He says to him, Ya Abu Sufyan, who supports him from your community? In the demographics of your community, where does much of the support come from? Abu Sufyan replies, he says, the noble ones hate him. They despise his message. The ones who support him are the commoners and the middle class. They support him with heavy support. They say, what about his followers? Have they increased in number? They said, yes, they are increasing day by day. Said, what about the apostates? Are there anyone who come towards the religion of Islam, anyone who accepts his message and then later on have left his message? Abu Sufyan says, no, none. None have entered the religion of Islam and left after. He said, what about his battles? Has he been victorious in his battles? Abu Sufyan says, sometimes he is victorious, sometimes he is the loser. Upon which Caesar, the Roman king, replies, he says, Wallah, if I was to see this man, I would give bay'at to him, number one, and I would wash his feet. Because it has come in our book that a final prophet will come that will supersede the religion of Isa alayhi salam. And he will come and he will bring forth these message. And then of course the dialogue continues. Amongst the letters that the Prophet sent was the letter that was sent towards the Christians of Najran. When the letter was sent to the Christians of Najran, they opened the letter of Rasulullah, upon which the Prophet of Islam said, O Christians of Najran, by the Lord of Ibrahim, by the Lord of Ishaq, and by the Lord of Ismail, I invite you towards the religion of Islam. I invite you to the worship of one Lord and not the creation of this one Lord. I invite you to the protection of this one Lord and not to the protection of the creation of this one Lord. If you reject this message, then I ask that you pay jizya for living in this Muslim empire. We all have to pay tax, isn't it? As British citizens or any citizens of any country, to be a part of this system, we need to pay tax. If you're a Muslim, you need to pay zakat, you need to pay khubs. But if you are a non-Muslim, then you have to pay a tax known as the jizya. So when they read this letter, an invitation towards the religion of Islam, they consulted with one another. What should we do? They investigated, they examined, they tried to find out who exactly is this Muhammad, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. They decided, one of them was asked a question. It was a very interesting question. He was asked, what do we do? Upon which this advisor of this consultation, he replies, he says, look, I'm not a religious scholar. I do not know many things about religion. But it has come within our sources that prophethood or rulership or kingship would be transferred from the lineage of Ishaq to the lineage of Ismail. And it is very much possible that this Muhammad may be a true prophet that has been prophesied in our books, because he comes from the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam. So they decided, they came to the conclusion that a group of emissaries would go towards the city of Medina and they would speak and engage in a dialogue with Rasulullah. So these emissaries, this group, they go towards the city of Medina and they are wearing the lavish of clothes, the most lavish of clothes, silk, colorful, showing that they are the representatives of Christianity, the Christians of Najran. They are wearing jewelry, the cross, they are wearing the hats. And today we have the same principle, isn't it? The Pope, for example, he wears a certain type of clothing. The priests in the Vatican, they wear certain types of clothing. So they entered the city of Medina, they struck out, They went directly to the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, Masjid al-Nabi. They saw the Prophet of Islam. When they met the Prophet of Islam, they saw that the Prophet was disturbed by the way they were acting. Because they were proudly walking, they were carrying themselves with a bit of arrogance, with a bit of pride. And so when they engaged with the Prophet of Islam, the Prophet did not pay any attention to them. And they realized that the Prophet had become disturbed, so they left Masjid al-Nabi. Long story short, they say that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam came towards them and said, why don't you downgrade a bit, remove all of your lavish clothing, and go wear dresses of humility and go towards him, and then he will speak with you. So they got rid of all of their jewelry, their lavish clothes. They wore simple clothes. They came towards the Prophet of Islam. Then the Prophet, of course, he embraces them. The Prophet of Islam engages in a dialogue with them. Rasulullah says to them that I invite you towards the religion of Islam, the belief in one God and the worship of one God. One of these emissaries, he replies, he says, look, if you're going to invite us to a faith, we have faith. If you're going to invite us to the belief in one God, we believe in one God. What's so new about this religion? Rasulullah replies, he says, Islam is different from Christianity. First of all, we do not worship the cross. Second, we do not, for example, consume the flesh of swine. We consider it to be forbidden. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ الْمِيتَ, for example, وَلَحْمِ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَالدَّمْ, and so on and so forth. And then he says, thirdly, we do not believe that Allah had a son. The idea or the element or the concept of a son of God is something that is far from the religion of Islam. The Christians, they replied, one of them replies, he says, but Jesus, the son of Mary, is a God. Rasulullah asks, how? He says, well, first of all, he had the power to raise the dead. Second, he cured the blind. Third, he manufactured a bird out of clay. He breathed into it and it became a real bird and it flew away. Number four, he had ilm al-ghayb and so on and so forth. Rasulullah replies, he says, it is indeed true that Jesus had such powers, but it was all bi'idhnillah, it was all under the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did not have independent power. He did not have power independent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah gave him the permission and he was able to do all of this. Indeed, he is the creation of Allah who was placed in the womb of Mary alayha salam. Upon which one of them replies, he says, this is another reason to believe that he is the son of God, because Mary was a virgin and this birth was a miracle birth, which tells us that his father is Rabb al-Alameen. Upon which Rasulullah replies, he replies according to the revelation of the verse of the Holy Quran. Jibreel descends and gives a verse to him, and the verse explains that if Isa is the son of God because he did not have a father, then what about Adam alayhi salam? Indeed, he did not have a father nor a mother. When this argument was presented towards the Christians of Najran, they came forward and they said that no, we're not convinced by this argument. Let us engage in a Mubahila. Let us engage in a malediction. We'll engage in a debate. The loser of this debate, we will turn to Allah and we will say, Ya Allah, curse upon the losers. This was considered to be a Mubahila. So they agreed on a Mubahila. The verse is revealed. فَمَنْ حَاجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. And if they continue to argue after knowledge has been given to them, فَقُولْ, then tell them, bring our sons, we'll bring your sons. Bring your women, we'll bring our women. Bring your sons, we'll bring our sons. Bring yourselves, and then we will bring ourselves. Fakhruddin al-Razi, it is important that we refer to his opinions. A Sunni scholar, profound Sunni scholar, rahmatullah alayh, has written a phenomenal tafsir known as Tafsir al-Kabir or Mafatih al-Ghaib, that even our Shi'i scholars use and utilize his information. We learn from his great knowledge. A masterpiece it was, or it is. In his tafsir, he begins to speak about the whole incident of Mubahila. He says on the day of Mubahila, Rasulullah, as his children, he brings alongside him Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn. As his women, he brings Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alameen. He does not bring the women of Medina. He brings the chief of all the women, the leader of all the women. As his self, Anfusana wa Anfusakum, he brings home, he brings his brother in faith, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. When all of these five, Ahl al-Kisa, go towards the area of Mubahila, Fakhruddin al-Razi narrates, he says that the Christians were now frightened when they saw these five. They had a dialogue before the Mubahila even taking place. They said amongst themselves, they said between themselves, that if Rasulullah on the day of the Mubahila brings his companions, and he brings his soldiers, and he brings his women, and he brings his entire nation, then know that this person is after the glory of this world and the material aspects of this world. He is after kingship, and that's all he cares about. But when they saw that he brought with him only members of his family, it showed, number one, humility. It showed, number two, the absolute conviction he had in the message of Islam, that he only brought those who represented truth, who were the embodiment of truth. Fakhruddin al-Razi narrates, he says, Wallah, one of them said to the other emissaries, he says, Wallah, I see such light coming from their faces, that if they were to raise their hands and pray to their Lord to move the biggest mountain of this world, Wallah, that mountain would move. He said, if they were to win this Mubahila, and they were to raise their hands and curse us, the Christians, not a single Christian will exist on the face of this earth. That is guaranteed. And so the Christians of Najran, they saw that it was best that they slowly turn away from this Mubahila. They stepped down from this Mubahila. They chose not to go ahead with it. When that Mubahila was then cancelled, Fakhruddin al-Razi, in a different narration in the same book, which is of course transmitted by other scholars amongst the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, very interestingly, he says that the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam were considered to be in the same level as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. In 5 areas. 5 areas where the Ahl al-Kisa were on the same level as Rasulullah. Number 1, in Tahara, they were purified. The sons of Imam Hassan, the sons of Rasulullah, Al-Hassan wal-Husayn, Sayyidi Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, Fatimat al-Zahra, Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alameen, and Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhim as-salam, all of them were pure. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ليطهركم تطهيرا. That they were all purified. Number 1, in purification they were of the same level as Rasulullah. Number 2, in loving them, Allah has commanded us to love them the way we love Rasulullah. إني لا أسألكم عليه أجر إلا المودة في القربى. This is an ayah of the Holy Quran made wajib upon every follower of the Holy Quran. Number 3, that Allah has sends His salams onto them the way He sends salam onto the Holy Prophet. Inna Allah wa malaikatuh yusallun ala nabi. They send peace and blessings and they send salawat upon the Ahl al-Bayt as they do upon Rasulullah. Number 4, sadaqah is haram for them the way sadaqah was haram on the Prophet of Islam. And number 5, that when a person wants his du'as and his hajats to be answered, he should refer to the Ahl al-Bayt just as how he refers to Rasulullah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And of course, when the verses of Mubahila are revealed, in the following verse or the few verses later, Allah commands the Holy Prophet, He says that now that the Christians of Najran have agreed to pay jizya, now that they have agreed to pay jizya and live in the empire, the Muslim empire, Ya Rasulullah, create an alliance with them based on the common features that exist between Islam and Christianity. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to gain His ma'rifah and the ma'rifah of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, so that we gain proximity towards Him, which will benefit us in this world as well as in the hereafter. If we can recite Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha for all our marhumeen who have not had the opportunity to join us this year on this lovely occasion. وآخر الدعوان الحمد لله رب العالمين وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين علي ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم